Welcome to the Enlightened Misfits podcast, the space for entrepreneurs on a quest for unwavering certainty and purpose. I'm your host, Lauren, and each episode is a compass guiding you through authentic conversations, unraveling the mysteries of your human design chart, and offering tools from the remarkable guest. Join me as we embark on a journey to manifest greatness and create a life aligned with our deepest purpose. This is a space where misfits find their enlightenment. Welcome to the Enlightened Misfits podcast. Welcome back to the Enlightened Misfits podcast. I am your host, Lauren, and in today's episode, I have an amazing guest here with me. This is Sabriye. She is a soul embodiment therapist. So we were just talking like briefly before we started recording. So I kind of want to know, when you call yourself another title was multi-dimension healer. How did you come about being the founder of this soul embodiment therapy and school? Can you kind of tell a little bit, or tell me and the listeners a little bit about how this came about?
Okay, yes. Kind of like two questions in there, but
Yeah.
let's start with the multidimensional healer aspect.
Yeah.
So the multidimensional is that we're not just only the physical body, and we're also not just the physical, emotional, mental body or the vibrational body, but we also have a causal body. And that's what I work with a lot. So I work with all these different bodies that are interrelated and interconnected and influence each other. And so the causal body is basically the highest body that we have, because this is the body that follows us from lifetime to lifetime. Now, when we die, the mental, emotional, vibrational, and physical body die, but it's the causal body that follows us from lifetime to lifetime. And in it, we carry our karmic templates. And karma is not a question of, punishment or reward. It's really that which was left unresolved in previous timelines that we carry with us through this karmic templates within the causal body. And that creates our mental, emotional, vibrational, and physical body for each new embodiment. And so when I talk about multidimensional healing, I'm talking about healing on all these different levels, but also in the three different timelines. So we also work within past life, ancestral, and current life, childhood and current life, but specifically childhood, because so much of our personality is reformed at that moment, even though much of our personality is inherited from our past life predecessors and ancestrally. So that's kind of the first question. Sorry, yes?
No, I was gonna say, yeah, no, I love that. And I love that you had said, I feel like a lot of things that are coming up too in my orbit or with my like clients too is when I hear somebody say, oh, they'll get their karma, or like, and I try to tell people that when you're saying that, you're just calling it to yourself, right? Because you're not the one that you don't want to be the one that's responsible for dealing out karma, right? I kind of can resonate with this because I thought I was like, oh, they're going to get their karma, or it's like, it's like we're not the karma gods. So I love that you say that, because karma is not good or bad. It's just whatever is destined, right? Whatever we picked before we came here, right? To kind of clear out.
Well, and it's not even what's destined. It's what wasn't dealt with yet.
Right.
It actually it stands in the way of what is destined because it blocks it.
Right. Right. Yes, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. So then the other question that I had for you is when you had said, like if in understanding like soul path healing, like
Mm-hmm.
how does past lives, because I know with me, I deal with a lot of past lives for, with my own experience or with clients, how
Mm-hmm.
does this contribute to somebody's like current experience? Or does like when you said ancestral or like childhood, does the role that the ancestral connection play shape your journey?
Well, actually, it's the majority of our issues, or basically all of our issues, are created on a soul path level. Yeah, so everything is past life, and that's where I differ from a lot of school of thoughts. A lot of people see like the ancestral wounding as a burden, like, oh, my previous generations, my mother and my grandmother, didn't clean up their shit, and now I have to carry it for them, you know, very victimy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so I don't believe that. What I've seen in my work, and I've worked with over 1,000 clients. I've done soul embodiment therapy for the past 7 years. So I've done a lot of this work. And what I've seen is that all our ancestral wounding has a direct connection to our own past life wounding. So we use the ancestral lineage to bring in soul wounding that we share as an earth family. So everyone that kind of like has the same type of wounding that they want to work on, kind of like pre-embodiment, we're like, okay, let's do it together. Then we can work it out together.
Right. Okay. So that makes a lot of sense the way that you put it. It's because it seems like a lot. I've been meeting a lot of people that are like, oh, my experience is the same as your experience. Or, I actually just talked to a client this morning and I kept saying, you kept popping up in my mind. And I thought I got to reach out to her. And then when I reached out to her, she was like, it's funny that you say that. And I was like, it's interesting. And I love those synchronicities because it just means that we're all in one consciousness. And that's literally what you just explained. So yeah, I love that. So now when you like you said that you deal with a lot of embodiment um in your work. Now when it comes to like past trauma, so whether it's like you said from like childhood or ancestral ties that impact our like soul paths, like what steps, like if a listener is listening to this, what steps can, besides working with you obviously, but what if they were to do this on their own for now, or kind of to understand like where they need to go, what steps can one take towards like healing these wounds?
Okay, so then we have to go back to the soul path.
Okay.
You were asking about past lives, and one past life in and of itself is often like a hit or miss, or it's very important, or it's not that important at all. It's because often it's also a repetition. So what we tend to do is kind of like repeat the same pattern over and over again over lifetimes and lifetimes. And
Yeah.
so then, you pick out one lifetime, and it could actually just be one in, a series of repetitions. It could still be a crucial one that will, unlock something for you. But actually, what you need to do is find the wound, the original wound that started the whole pattern. And
Okay.
that's how I work with clients as well. And I actually also teach this. I have a certification for therapists to become soul embodiment therapists. And
Oh,
so um, what we need to do is we need to go back to that original wound in order to see the story there. And when we heal that, it directly heals everything going on in our current life as well. Because that was one of the questions you asked, is
yeah.
how does this affect here? Because I mean, why would you go mess around here if you don't need to,
Right.
right?
Right.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
just leave it. But
Yeah.
it's because on a soul path level, all of these psychological patterns and subconscious programming that we carry today were created on that level. So we have been carrying so much of our wounding already since, the split from source.
Right.
Or the incarnation wound, or where we split the masculine from the feminine. These were all important time experiences, or well, soul experiences, basically, where we created certain wounding that influenced who we became and who we are, or not actually who we are, but who we still believe to be,
Right. Right.
because
Yeah.
it's actually only the wounded ego. Yeah. So we
Right.
identify with that, which is why we think it's who we are. But and that's the soul embodiment part of it. It's when we can heal this trauma lens, and when we can heal this illusionary self that we identify with, then we can truly embody who we are on a soul level.
Yeah. Now, the one thing that popped out in my mind when you
Hmm.
said incarnation wound. Now,
Yeah.
I'm curious. I mean, I guess I kind of can just guess what that means, but can you explain what the incarnation wound is and like what it
Yeah.
entails?
Yeah. So let me start with the first wounding, and that's the split from source wound.
Okay.
So that's when the soul splits from source and then interprets that split from source in a certain way that creates the first trauma. So we either experience as abandonment, rejection, being discarded, being outcast, and so on.
Okay.
And that creates kind of like an imprint. Then we go split the masculine from the feminine. And when we truly, because, within the human experience, we're no longer androgynous as we are on a soul level, but we are separate, right?
Yeah.
And basically, it's constantly a game of separation. We're splitting off deeper and deeper and deeper. And so the incarnation wound is the point where we split from our own divinity. Yeah, so it's
Mm,
where the ego really goes into this illusion of being separate and left to fend for its own.
okay. So it's kind of like our ego is separate from our higher self. Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
Or okay,
yeah.
okay.
And
But
and
it's
it,
not
it
really, it's just the illusion, like you said.
exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. And it wasn't that way before, I mean, when we started with Source, we were still completely in that, oneness.
Right,
Even when we split, the masculine from the feminine, we still had, a sense of oneness. It started to dissipate somewhat, but we were still in that oneness. And then the final split is this, split from the ego and the higher self or the soul.
right.
And that's where, we really go into this duality.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, well, that's kind of where I started in my journey. I was like, I got to the point of my healing that I was like, I don't want to be human anymore. I don't want my ego. I don't, like, and I feel like that
Mm,
a lot of us, I feel like there's a lot of people that experience that. And then I realized, okay, so like I can get along with my ego. My ego's not bad. My ego's here to protect me, all that stuff. So like I had to start accepting, like accepting, loving, transcending my ego versus trying to run away from it or reject it. But I also do
I
know that
feel it.
one of my generational traumas, which, people can find from their human design, is rejection. So every part of my life, it was rejection. Like I was rejecting myself, rejecting parts of like things that I didn't really like about myself, and then, accepting them and kind of like I stopped doing that. Things just magically, it's not magic, but like magically got better.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and that kind of like pattern. So
Yeah.
if you say, well, my pattern has been rejection,
Yeah.
that's also what is created by this split from source wound. It's how we
Okay.
interpret that experience is how we kind of like carry that through in every experience that we have because we're continuously trying to heal it.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. I'll have to look back at some of my client charts because some people have suppression, some people have, there's a whole bunch of different ones. And a lot of people, there's some people that don't really have that abandonment. Like they're not scared of abandonment. Like it's not
Mm-mm.
that really deep fear. And I know that obviously everybody's different, but I personally feel like I had an abandonment wound too. So it's like,
Mm.
that's like you said, it's actually interesting the way that you say it because it makes sense. It's like full circle now. It all makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
there are like multiple ways to interpret it because like in general, most wounding with a
Mhm.
source is also interpreted as a betrayal.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see how that is looked at like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or it's, that comes to my next question is the shadow self. So obviously, I'm sure you agree that the shadow self is like a key aspect of our inner work. Now, how can somebody explore or address the shadow aspect of their inner masculine or feminine that can contribute to their overall healing? What is like one thing that could you give the listeners like an example of like how you kind of work through it with your clients or have done it for yourself?
Yeah. So, well, there are two layers to that. I mean, first there are, for example, the shadow archetypes of the masculine and the feminine,
Hmm.
which is where we're either too much of the feminine or the masculine, or we're too little, not able to embody it at all.
Okay.
So I work with, for example, the collapsed inner masculine and the rigid inner feminine, which is both not enough masculine or feminine because you're not able to embody either of them,
Okay.
or the overbearing masculine and the insatiable feminine, which is the masculine in the extreme and the feminine in the extreme. So much of that wounding is wounding within our inner template of the masculine and feminine, which is a lot of patriarchal wounding as well. And this is interesting because, we don't realize how much we do carry subconscious patriarchal conditioning, and it's insane because we can consciously believe in all the kind of like modern ideas that we currently believe in, and then still have, for example, past life subconscious beliefs that are completely according to the patriarchal, way of thinking. So, for
Yeah.
example, in my own journey, what I found was that there was still a past life as a man in which I believed that men and women weren't created equally. That was just one of those kind of like Christian belief systems
Yeah.
that was held on to for quite some time, right?
Yeah.
And and I had a lifetime in which I was a man where I truly and deeply believed in that. And so it was very interesting for me to see that despite all of my modern ideas about emancipation, about feminism, that there was such a, basically, a counteracting belief underneath. And that's the thing with the subconscious and the conscious. The subconscious beliefs that we hold are much stronger than our conscious ones. And so
Yeah.
they will always cancel our conscious beliefs out, which is one of the reasons why I am not a great fan of like affirmations, because yeah, I mean, you
Yeah.
can't stomp, you can't stomp it out. You have to truly
Yeah.
go in there and find it, and then, then you can work with it. But as long as you have like this contradicting belief subconsciously, yeah, no matter how much you put on it, it's not easily going to shift.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
That's
yeah.
no, I was gonna say, go ahead.
Okay. So that's one part of it. And then, the shadow self is, to me, is the wounded ego. Yeah, it's the wounded ego is posing as the self when it is obviously not the true self. And so uh, one of the things that that I work with is that the idea that in order to incarnate, in order to, transform from light beings into physical beings, actually trauma was the way to help us densify. Yeah, so the experience of trauma is what allowed us to densify our energy field into the physical. So we needed trauma in order to be able to incarnate. And that's what, the accumulation of that's what creates the shadow self. And that's what kind of stops us from being able to truly embody who we are on a soul level. And when we can heal that layer, of wounding that we accumulated simply through the incarnation process, then we can truly embody who we are on a soul level in the physical here and now. And so that's the focus of my work also.
Okay. I would say I love that the way that you explain that because I think often a lot of people with that victim mentality that they're like, oh, poor me, my trauma, this happened to me. And the way
Mm,
that you explained it, I love that you explained it that way because like we all came here, like we have to have trauma. So I always remind
yeah.
people like you wouldn't have a story. None of us would have a story if we didn't have traumatic experiences. I mean, maybe not, some people are, 25 years old and they've had a life full of trauma. Well, obviously
Hmm.
that's a story, and at least you can start at 25 to start healing, and live the life that you want to live and not 45 or 50, right? So I
Yeah.
love that, the earlier on that you learn it, like I have a 4-year-old daughter. So it was like,
Mm,
for the longest time, she was the reason why I decided to start, healing. And
Yeah.
I just knew I had a bigger purpose here on earth. But um, a lot of people, I hear, oh, it's my mom. She didn't teach me this, or oh, it's,
Yeah.
that it's always that blame. And it's like, no, it's like they did the best that they could. A lot of my mom's generations are that generation. They just weren't consciously aware or weren't given the tools for that. Right. So it's like
Mm.
they didn't, how are they just did the best they could,
Mhm.
with what they could, and I always remind my mom about that because I know that she probably holds some guilt or shame because I'm publicly speaking about my trauma. And, I
Mm.
know that kind of probably brings up stuff when she listens to my podcast. And I'm like, no, mom, it's just stuff that I talk about, to give awareness to. It has nothing to do with you. So I love
Yeah.
that the way that you say it with the shadow self, because I believe the same thing that you believe. So I love that. So
Beautiful.
the only other question that I had for you, and you can speak about anything if you have any um, programs, or if there's if somebody listening to this would like more information to kind of connect with you too, because I know that you have a school too. So
Mhm.
the only other thing that I had a question about was when you talk about the feminine and like the wounded feminine and wounded
Mhm.
masculine, is there any specific signs or signals that
Oh,
somebody
yeah.
would have in their life that, like, how do they know that they have a wounded masculine or a wounded feminine? Like, how would they know?
Yeah. Okay. So with the collapsed inner masculine and the rigid inner feminine, that's one of the most prominent ones, and especially now, like a lot of women are left on their own to raise their own children. I don't know what your situation is, but
Yeah,
it's
that's my situation.
that's your situation, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's also true for a lot of spiritual women that they have like a collapsed inner masculine. And so what we see when we have a collapse in a masculine is that our own fathers were either abusive or absent.
Mhm.
That we have difficulties setting boundaries because the masculine is the part of us that is able to assert boundaries, and that's often how it collapses in on a childhood level. Is that, for example, through abuse, the masculine wasn't able to protect us because whoever abused us was bigger and stronger.
Right.
So that collapses the masculine, and one of the most important things that happens when the inner masculine collapses is that the inner feminine is left to fend for her own. Yeah, there is
Yeah.
nothing there anymore to protect her, and so in order to protect herself, she becomes rigid. She becomes hard. She closes off in order to protect herself. So she has difficulty being vulnerable. She has difficulty receiving love, receiving money. She needs control, and not because she wants to dominate people, but she kind of is a control freak in order to stay safe. Do you recognize that?
Yeah. It's like, yeah, you're like reading me. Yeah.
No,
My
no, no.
dad was, I was gonna say my dad was here, like my
Yeah,
parents did not get divorced, but he was unemotional, like he was
yeah,
like emotionally unavailable.
yeah.
That flipped for my daughter though. So he became pretty much
Oh,
more
nice.
very emotionally like, and I published this in one of my books that I realized that the envy and jealousy I felt when he would do this, like the things that I wanted him to do with me, he would do it for my daughter. I had to take myself out of it because it wasn't about me anymore. It was about my daughter. So I was able to view this from a higher perspective of
Yeah.
maybe he wasn't supposed to be there for me. He was supposed to be there for my daughter because later on in life, I had a daughter. So it's like,
Yeah.
that now, I have a boyfriend that it steps up and that she looks at him as a
Mm,
father figure. She still has her father, but he's not going to be that father figure that she looks up to.
hmm.
It's kind of he's still around when he wants to, be like, he sees her maybe like once a month or whatever, but
Hmm.
nothing that's going to be stable for her. So
Hmm.
she has other figure like father figures, which that's really all that matters, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
and that's wonderful that she's able to have that. I think
yeah,
also, that being a father or a grandfather are two very different things. I
Yeah.
think in the time that your father was your father, he was still very much focused on providing for the family,
Yeah.
working, that took much more out of him than now that he perhaps is able to take it more easy
Yeah.
and also realize what he has lost. I remember right before my father died that he realized how much he had lost by not interacting sufficiently with us and our our children, his grandchildren, and he really deeply regretted that.
Yeah.
So I think that's also a thing that plays out. And what you said is that um if we have, for example, a collapse inner masculine on a soul path level, there is no way that we're going to not, create that on a current incarnation level. What is there on a soul path level, we're going to create here on a current incarnation level. And so, yeah, I think these are ways that people can kind of like recognize, like, oh yeah, this is me. This is because I think for a lot of women, this is so, so recognizable. And the thing is that just slamming on a little bit of lipstick and putting on a dress doesn't fix this. It's not
Yes.
it's so deep, because it's
Yeah.
really about this inner safety that is missing, this inner structure. And so for that, we really need to like work on this deeper soul path level in order to like heal the inner masculine. Because when the inner masculine is back, you can't, the inner feminine, when she's rigidified, you can't work with her unless you heal the inner masculine.
Yeah.
Yeah, because without this, she cannot open up.
Right.
So, that's really the path that you need to work on. So, the focus is on the inner masculine, healing that aspect of yourself. And so you were asking about perhaps an offer. What I'm doing at the moment is I'm helping a single mother in India. She's a single mother with two children. She has vitiligo, and she lives in rural India where that is seen as, it's seen as like a curse or something. They're very negative about it, and so she's a little bit on her own, except for her mother who's helping her. So I've started a fundraiser for her, and I have these fundraiser spots.
Okay.
So the money goes directly to the family to help them, rebuild their life. And in those spots, I help people, for example, with what we're talking about now,
Hmm.
which is the inner masculine, the inner feminine, or other, like manifestation or clarity or, repetitive patterns. All of that you can bring into these sessions, and then I help you heal them, and then the proceeds of that money go to India to help these people. And so these spots are like 55 euros, which is it's around $60.
Hmm.
So they're low price, but they're like laser focused coaching that really quickly helps you on your way, and then helps the family in India. So I would like to extend that as an offer to your listeners,
Oh,
which then
awesome.
also helps the family in India,
Yeah.
in their lives.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'll make sure I get all of those. If you have like a
Yeah,
link, I'll make sure that,
yeah,
yeah,
I'll send
make
you.
sure you send that. Yes. Awesome. All right.
Perfect.
I was going to say, is there any other final thoughts that you have for our listeners or anything else that you would like to say before we end?
Wow. Well, it was a joy being here, and yeah, well, if you like the thoughts that I've shared, I also share soul teachings on my website. These are for free. I send one out every month, so they're very in-depth articles in which I tackle things such as the sisterhood wound. Or, for example, the last one was about the shadow emotions that are blocking your chakras. So all different aspects of, for example, relationship, healing, um, spirituality. Those are all topics that I write about, and that are really thought-provoking and help people, in their journey.
Awesome. I know I'm going to have to check that out.
Mhm.
I'd say I enjoyed our conversation. So thank you for everybody joining us today on the Enlightened Misfits podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe. You can leave a review and share with somebody that you feel that will gain knowledge from listening. So stay tuned for more captivating conversations in the future. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week. I will see you next time. Thank you for joining us on another enlightening episode on the Enlightened Misfits podcast. If you resonate with this conversation and found it insightful, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. Your feedback fuels our mission. Remember, your journey to unwavering certainty and purpose is ongoing. Stay connected with us on social media and let's continue this conversation. Let's manifest greatness in our lives. Until next time, this is Lauren from the Enlightened Misfits podcast. Stay enlightened, stay inspired, and keep manifesting your extraordinary path.